All right, let's get back to work. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's do a third hypothetical. We're back to. Hello? Shush! Shush or die! All right, come on, third hypothetical. All right. Matthew, would you be kind to?
Which one are we doing?
This is questions 12 through 16 on exam number 71.
A 6-week literature course is being planned in which 6 books, F, K, N, O, R, and T, will be discussed. The books will be discussed one at a time, one book per week. One at a time, one book per week. In addition, written summaries will be required for one or more of the books. The order in which the books are discussed and the selection of books to be summarized is subject to the following conditions.
Okay, you're at the colon, yes? So you stop. Would it be fair to say they've actually used the word order? So if there were any ambiguity, it's been removed. So the only remaining issue is this thing about the books being summarized, because it say one or more. So it does suggest that we'll need not only to order them, but to track, is it being summarized or not?
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say, as we would have made in our initial evaluation, this is order driven with a assignment variable in the element to it, similar to the suspects, whether they confessed or they didn't confess. I think we had some, like a night shift crew. We had 6 people working and there was a night shift crew, right? So you had to file, okay, that means, there are 2 people on the night shift crew and 4 people on the day. So now I'm all set. What are our constraints?
No 2 books that are summarized are discussed in consecutive weeks.
So is it fair to say that's what I'm going to see? Now that doesn't say anything about books that are not summarized. It just says you're not going to have 2 consecutive books that are summarized. Okay, what's next?
If N is not summarized, then both R and T are summarized.
Is that R and T?
Yeah, Roger and Tommy.
So I would just digest that for a moment and say, so what does that mean, right? Because this is the law. So when N is summarized, I know the condition of both R and T, yes? And there's only one other possibility, right? And the only other possibility is that N is that N is summarized, right? So I would just stop and digest this for a minute, right? Okay, so is it fair to say if N is summarized, at least one of these 2 is not? Talk to me, yes? They don't have to be, because they're saying when this is not summarized, these 2 are summarized, right? Okay. So if this is summarized, this condition cannot exist. And this condition ceases to exist when any one of them is not summarized. You've got to wrap your...
So
Sure.
it doesn't have to be both.
No, it doesn't have to be both. And again, this is what I'm saying. Going back to what I was saying before, it really is, law is, you need to write with greater precision than the person who's reading it reads with, right? And you need to read with greater precision than the precision with which the person writes. Do you get that's what law is? So I've really tried hard to do this and be brain dead, but it hasn't worked. You can't be brain dead, right? So here we are, and oh yeah, it's games. This isn't a game. It's will you read with the precision required of that the writer is requiring, and the writer's somebody like me. Okay, so it's not formal logic. It's bullshit. It's will you read with the precision required of you. So this says, the affirmative statement, right, is, okay, when n's not summarized, so nobody's going to misread that, right? You say, all right, when n's not summarized, they both are summarized, right? That's not where the issue is going to be. Okay, so what can you tell me when n is summarized? Well, here's what you can tell me. Would it be fair to say you can tell me that condition does not exist? Talk to me. That condition does not exist. In other words, when n is summarized, this cannot happen.
Those two, yes.
Yes.
Okay. I thought you were just.
No, this as a condition. This is a single condition.
Yeah.
Right? This dictates this outcome. Right? If this is not realized, that outcome is not realized. So how do you not get that outcome? One or both is not summarized, then that has to be summarized. Do you see it, Patrick?
The opposite is true, you're saying.
Well, it all depends what the word opposite means. So I would prefer to articulate it, right? When this condition does not exist, meaning that n is summarized,
Yeah.
this is an impossibility. The this means you could not have both R and T summarized. So you can't have n summarized and both R and T summarized.
Why?
Because this says when n is not summarized, that happens,
So if that condition does not exist,
meaning n is summarized.
yeah, then how does that have any effect on R and T afterwards?
Well,
My question is just the way it's worded. Is it saying that, like obviously if n then if is not, then R and T exist together, but if n is summarized, that doesn't mean that is R and T a pair in that?
Yes.
Can R and N exist and can N and T exist? It just can't be
Right.
N R T, correct?
here's how it's going to look. Summarized. But it's not summarized. Let me reverse this. And these are great questions. I mean, if we would do this as a pure conditional, we would have this as summarized. And we would have this as not summarized. If we were to state the explicit condition is that when n is not summarized, then both R and T are summarized. So far, yes? Everybody on board up to this point?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what follows from that, if R or T or both are not summarized, then N is summarized.
So it's
Yeah.
a mandatory. It's mandatory if one of those violates,
Or both.
then it has to be
That's correct.
summarized.
That's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
So it would, and is
So-
summarized,
so-
and R, and neither R nor T may be, in
Okay.
any event.
And again, trying, yeah, Patrick.
So one of the R's or the T could be on the other side, on that one. Like it could
Oh,
be-
that's correct, yeah.
It could be RN not is summarized.
That's correct.
And T is not.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was saying. Only one of them has to, they could both be in the condition of not being summarized, but it only takes one.
All three of them can't be on, the two and the one, like, yeah, can't be on one side.
Oh, yeah, no, they can. They could all be summarized.
They can all be summarized?
They could all be summarized. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
So all three,
Because it's a, if you summarize R and T,
What?
then,
Now, Lizbeth, respectfully,
I'm sorry.
No.
Then it
that,
would be-
would it be fair to say that this tells us a condition when N is not summarized? It's not just N, it's N when N is not summarized. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah.
And is it fair to say the deduction that we made has to do with when R or T or both are not summarized? Is that fair to say? So the if is the law. This is the antecedent and the consequence. The if is the law. The effect of the law tells us nothing, because the effect can come about in the absence of the law. Here's the effect. So it is perfectly possible that all three of these can be summarized, so long as they're not adjacent to each other, so long as they're not 3 and 4 or 5 and 6, because then you can't have two summarized consecutively. But would you? Where is the trick? Somebody show me the trick. How about the trick is to learn how to reason so that you can represent clients, and you probably have to reason with greater awareness than the client you're representing. Am I missing something? Well, this is it. So, Patrick, does this cause it to congeal for you?
No, I think you answered it, because my problem was when N is summarized, it doesn't make the other two have to be not summarized.
I don't know anything when N is summarized. Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
It doesn't do anything.
No.
So, but when T or R is not summarized, that falls into the rules though.
That is correct. Yeah.
That means N would have to.
Right. That's the deduction. This is what you're looking to see. In other words, the way the test is operating, and the more you can explain this to yourself, the better off you are. This brings about that outcome, right? So this is necessary for that to be there. In other words, it's cause and effect. But if you're going to say this cause brings about this effect, right? Okay. If it rains, I'll get wet. I'm not wet. It didn't rain. So I mean, you could, but standing for a principle, right? This R and T have to be summarized for N not to be summarized. And nobody wants to see it that way because you're looking at an arrow, right? As though that dictates the law. This is required. In the absence of this complete condition, that cannot occur, because that brings about that complete condition. Right? So if this isn't here, that can't be there. Okay, so what is it? Does everybody get that? This absolutely has to be here for N not to be summarized. Talk to me. Do you guys see it? Because it's not going to change on your test. Okay. Well, would it be fair to say if R is absent, this is not here? This entire condition is not here. If T is absent, the entire condition is not there. If they're both absent, the entire condition is not there. That's what that says. So any of those conditions brings that about. Bina.
What's the difference between if then and if and only if then?
There is quite a difference.
Okay, I'd like to know.
Yeah. If and only if
Yeah.
is saying that there is a one condition, good night, lights out. So if I were to say, Peter will get wet if and only if it rains, that is a very different statement from if it rains, Peter will get wet. Right? Because if and only if means there ain't nothing else. So if and only if is a sufficient condition, that is an exclusive condition.
Right.
That's the only way I could get wet. Whereas an if then is a sufficient condition, but there may be thousands of other conditions sufficient to bring about that outcome.
So do we acknowledge the contrapositives for both?
The contrapositive is a scam. It is this tiny little part of all of this. So if you want to, all the contrapositive says is that in an if-then statement, if the then's not there, the if's not there. You're reversing the gate. So okay, it has a narrow application, but that's, I don't want, forget the word. Right? The concept is, in an if-then statement, if you affirm the if, you get the then. If you disaffirm the if, you don't know anything about the then. If you affirm the then, you don't know anything about the if. And if you disaffirm or negate the then you negate the if. Don't you think that kind of stuff might be analogous to learning property law? It's ugly, it's boring, it's dense, it sucks. Okay, and if you can demonstrate the capacity to do that on this test, what do you think you're likely to do in law school? Say yes to the LSAT. The LSAT loves you. Where the hell are we? Okay, so now I'm way off. I've got to try to re-engage my mind, such as it is. But that is what that means, and trying to figure it out while you're sitting for the test is not, you know what I'm saying. If you're in the exam center saying, "What did Peter say about that?" You're fucked. Okay. So I'm looking at this and I see all that. You with me? Talk to me.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not writing all that stuff out because, oh gosh, I'm prepared. Okay. So I look at the statement that if this isn't asked, these two guys are, and I say, all right, well, if either one of those two conditions changes, right, then N's got to be summarized. Okay. What's next? Is there another constraint? Was Matthew reading that? No.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Matthew.
Well, we'll just wait for Matthew to come back. Gary, how about it? Would you mind?
Sure, am I reading
I
that
think
first?
we're down to the final two constraints.
N is discussed earlier than T, and T is discussed earlier than O.
So we have NTO. Okay, underline the N, underline the T, underline the O. Now, do you see how this is order driven, right? Okay, what's next?
F is discussed earlier than O, and O is discussed earlier than both K and R.
And here we have F, O, and O's earlier than who?
O was discussed earlier than both K and R.
Okay. Now, and was that the last constraint?
Yep.
But you guys get, if you didn't understand what this meant, you'd be toast. Okay. Now, would it be fair to say this information, these last two constraints, seems very similar to what we did in the first hypothetical? Right. So they're yelling at you, here's a tree, we know what I'm calling a tree constraint, but who cares what you call it, right? Do you guys see we're going to organize on that, and then we're going to apply that? Okay. So I'm going to go with just put up this FOKR. And then I'm going to put NTO in there. Okay. And I'm done with this part. Does everybody see that this is, in terms of the order, the organization of the order part of this is identical to what we did in the first hypothetical? Yes? I see it. Well, that's what your test is going to be. They're not going to give you anything new. Test hasn't changed in since 1994. It's the last time they changed the test. Bina?
Can you explain how the tree, I always have trouble putting the tree together, like the arrows that come in between the O and...
Okay, sure. Well, what this says to me is, for one thing, is I can tell you that O is going to go forward. Because O has to go after N and T, right? But O's also going to have to go after F, right? So is it fair to say O can't be first, second, or third? Isn't it also fair to say O's got to come before K and R? Well, how cool would it be to look at that and say, oh, O's fourth?
Oh, cool. Finally I got it.
Well, finally, Catherine, the test, again, when you're in a culture where this is diminished, right? This test is diminished, the reasoning surrounding the test is diminished, the whole bloody thing is just diminished. It's not finally, you're doing just fine. This is hard, and it takes time for most people, and many people don't have the patience or the perseverance to stay with it because they've got A's by doing nothing. You go to college and you just do your little college thing and you move up, and this ain't that. So you're fine. Yeah, Kevin?
Well, you know what, I was totally confused, though what I found out, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I might be figuring this thing out wrong, but the way the tree goes and what you said, I always put it together, and I follow the arrows like clockwise, so F, N, T, R, so that's why I know it goes forward. You know, because F leads, it starts, and then the rest they go forward clockwise. following the arrow.
And could be first. These guys could be first. In other words, what I know from this,
It could be, but you have the arrow, you see, you say F goes before O, but before O comes, you gotta do N and T, so I always do F, and then I see that the N and the T have to come before the O.
well, here's what it would look like.
I mean, that's how I start figuring, that's how I start following.
Okay.
And then I can see that, I know that you can do, that the T can go,
All right, let me get that. Beta, do you get that O's got to be 4? Does everybody see that O's got to be 4?
Yeah.
yep,
Does everybody see K and R going to be 5th and 6th?
yes.
I don't know who's who, but I mean, if you look at this, right, and you figure out O's 4th, and you don't figure out K and R are 5 and 6, you're probably not going to law school. I mean, you know, give yourself a hug and have some wine, but it's not going to work out. Yeah. So that's KR, that's KR. And then you come over here and you say, all right, I have to have N and T this way. And I wouldn't be doing this, but if you wanted to, and I'm done. So this, if you wanted to make this more, you know, if you wanted to break it down further, then, do you see that N or T could be first or second?
Yes,
T could be second or third.
right,
F could be first, second, or third.
right.
That's it. There's nothing, right? And then really all you're doing now is the assignment or attribution part where you're deciding like who's summarized and who's not summarized. And the constraint there is simply that you cannot have consecutive books that are summarized. They could all be not summarized. You could have 6 books that were not summarized. You just can't have 2 back to back that are summarized. That's it. There's nothing else. So in terms of what you're managing here, this, and then the understanding of this one constraint. And there's your linear, is this, Bean, does this make sense?
Yeah, it was just a tree. I find it more clearer to put it like that than do anything else.
Yeah, but kiddo, I really would, see, it's not always gonna go this way. See,
No,
if
of
you're,
course, right.
you know, so it's really important that you actually take the time to learn to read this, because like I don't need that, because I'm looking at this and I say, oh yeah, O's 4.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to look for that entry question.
But that thing, the lines that you're going across horizontally lets you know your variables with F, N, and T. Gives you a little bit more, after you make your tree.
Oh, here,
gives
well,
you
if-
your variables across to like hangman, like go ahead, what's that hangman?
No, it's not like Hangman. But this all comes at a price. What I'm saying is, if you find this more concrete, right, don't you have to take the time to create it?
Yes.
I don't. All right, and that's not because I'm Einstein. I don't because I'm more prepared than you are. I'm not because I can look at this and I can give you a complete and accurate list of every letter and every place that letter could be, and it's going to take me about 8 seconds.
So is it because you see the way the tree is, you automatically know when you look at it that F, T, and N?
I wasn't born seeing the way it is. You with me? I had to learn to do this. I'm not the, I fell down from the fucking sky with my 180, and you're just supposed to, we're going to do the Vulcan mind meld, right? And you're going to get, the bullshit, right? I do this because I'm prepared. I can try cases because I'm prepared. I can argue appeals because I'm prepared. Helps to have a personality, but I've survived without one. It's preparation. So, it's not, you don't want to work, don't work. All right, but you're going to have a very, very, very ugly day with me if you come into a courtroom or to a legal proceeding and you are not prepared. Nope. So it really is important for you to be able to look at this, and here's all it is, being an F cannot be 4, 5, or 6.
No,
That's
I
it.
organized correctly, but it wasn't clear, and that's why I stopped and had to look back. But that's clear. I mean, you just look at it and you can see, like you said, oh, it's 4th. It's just right in your face. So that's why I was like,
Okay.
right.
All right. So, I don't know, here I just, let's just look at 13. If N is the second book discussed, so here you'd say, all right, if you did this, we would just put N here, we would change the color. If N,
Thank you.
if N is the second book discussed and is not summarized, right? So you put N in here, and it's not summarized. Now, does everybody agree what they did is trigger the remaining constraint? And in the most non-threatening form humanly possible, right? They gave you, oh, okay. Well, if N's not summarized,
And R and T.
both R and T are summarized. Okay. And if N is second, who's third?
T.
T. You guys see it? And T's what? T summarized. Okay. Who's first? F. Do we know if F is summarized or not? Could F be summarized? Would you be in compliance with this constraint? Yes. Could F not be summarized? Is there anything that says you can't have two of these things not summarized back to back?
No, it doesn't say that.
Okay. So they're looking for what could be. So it's either here or down here. You can now say if they said what must be, doesn't it have to be the case that S is not summarized? Right. But that's not what they're looking for. Okay, so if N is the second book discussed, N is not summarized, which should find could be true. A says F is summarized. Bada bing, bada boom. Do you guys see it? Could that be true? But does it have to be true? So if 20% of the answers on this test are A, wouldn't you love on, say, 50% of those occasions to pick A and then just be done with it? Talk to me. But that's preparation. And maybe 100%, but for sure it's going to be way above 50% if you're prepared. 40% of the answers are likely to be A or B. So if you pull the trigger on 50% of that 40%, didn't you just pull the trigger on 20% of the test?
Yes.
You want to be lawyers, right? I'm just it's tactical and it's strategic. And yeah, you can't be brain dead. So if you're brain dead, sorry.
So what about the other method when you said AE, go with that, that's another?
No, this has nothing to do with analytical. What I'm saying in logical reasoning, if you're in questions 17 through 22, and if the issue is read and the law is read, then your analysis is going to be read. And under those circumstances,
Then you go with the other?
I would go AE and then my way up. Yeah.
A, E, C, D,
Yeah.
B.
Yeah, but yeah.
I'm trying to,
Okay.
trying to organize and manage.
All right. Get this fourth hypothetical up. Kara, would you be good enough to get someone to read?
Museum curator is arranging 7 paintings. M, P, R, S, T, V.
I'm sorry. N,
M,
M.
P,
Yep.
R,
Yeah.
S, T, V, W.
Okay.
The paintings will be arranged in a horizontal row of 7 positions, with the first position being closest to the entrance, and the 7th being furthest from the entrance. Can we read the constraints?
Oh, and that's it. So we're at the colon. So how clear is this? Right. It's left to right. It's linear. I'll wait for the constraints before I draw anything. So sure. What are my constraints?
T must be closer to the entrance than W.
Okay.
R must be closer to the entrance than M with exactly one other paint in between them. So R space M.
Okay.
P and S must be next to each other.
Okay.
if V is not in the third position, it must be in the fourth position.
So V3, V4.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Nope.
Do you see how here, nobody is underlined twice?
Right.
So this is going to be management driven. Is it fair to say, do you all see you can bifurcate on V3, V4? So you're going to bifurcate on V3, V4, and you're going to manage, because they're not giving you, in other words, to get additional evidence, right, you're going to have to go into the individual questions, because they're not giving you multiple evidence on any individual. So all this is, I'm done. Now, I will take a moment to look at it, but you get this is, to me, this is entirely management driven. That's how they're going to let you organize. That's right. Is it fair to say that this represents not only the letters R and M, but a sequence of 3? Talk to me. That's what you're getting tested on. So, do you see, and you're not trying, I'm just trying to make you aware of it. You wouldn't be trying to organize on the principle. You're going to be managing on the principle. Do you see how you mess that up by placing something there? Because you have to have a if it's not this, right? All right. So you want to be aware, to accommodate that second constraint, you need a sequence of 3 somewhere. But that's it. Okay. But same thing. Let's start with that number 18, because I'm done. There's no further management, and I know that because there's nothing that's underlined twice. Okay. Okay. So number 18 says if S is 7, which one of the following could be true about T? Okay. So somewhere out there's some poor bastard that's putting S in 7 and is looking at the answer choices. Right, they're not doing anything else, they're just looking at the answer choices. Well, let me ask those of us who are less asleep. If F is 7, who is 6? So, hello. Now, we've got 4 letters to account for. Is it fair to say the 4 letters to account for are right here? All right? And R, you need a sequence of 3 for this. All right? And the question, we want to know about T, right? We're being asked about where T could be?
Yeah.
Okay. So you will just pick one of the hypotheticals. It could be true. So if it's true on one hypothetical, then we're done. Okay. So we'll start at that top hypothetical. Is it fair to say you couldn't put R on 1? You guys see it? If you went up here, is it fair to say you could not place R on 1 because you'd have M standing on V's head?
Right.
Right? Okay, you could put R on 2. Is it fair to say you can't put R on 4 or 5? Talk to me. Do you see it? It doesn't in the top hypothetical, but you've got to be patient. What the exam is requiring of you is a patience, right? And almost impossible time conditions. It's a great test. It's a trial. Do you guys get R's got to be 2 in the top hypothetical? Talk to me. So, if one of the answer choices was T could be 1, is it fair to say you have the answer? Tragically,
It's not.
it's not. That's when you mumble under your breath, bastards, right? Right, because it's not there. So now you go to the second hypothetical. There's someplace else T can be. Okay. Well, let's go back to RM. Okay, you could get R and M in 1 and 3, right? You could get R and M in 3 and 5, right? Well, so where's T gotta be?
Two.
2. In order to make that work, T's gonna have to be in 2. Because you gotta get W behind the T, right? Oh, gee, I wonder if that was an answer choice. That T was second. Yeah, A says T is second. So, would it be fair to say that for those issues intended to be resolved without a ton of difficulty, right? They're not all designed that way. But would it be fair to say for issues that are going to reward people for organizing and managing well, we've done this for all 4 hypotheticals? Talk to me. So can you see from that, from the ability to organize each of the 4, can you see a bare minimum of 12 right? Talk to me. Right? Can you see a likelihood of 15 right? Okay. And a possibility of 17 or more right? Right? But, so you've got to, the key to all this, from my judgment, is you've got to look at each of the 4 hypotheticals. You've got to make a judgment, do I recognize it? If you're looking at one and you say, I don't have a clue what they're doing, then you're down to 3, and you may need to invest more time on issues that you prefer to stay away from, because you're down to 3. But if you can widen your scope, then you can narrow your deck. You don't have to go as deep, right, because you're going wider. And just keep in mind, you get a 15, you will kick the vast majority of test takers' asses. If you get a 15 in analytical, it is very likely you will go to law school. Very likely. Because you're picking up a substantial advantage over people who are, you can have intuitive gifts and you know, for logical and reading comp, you can go in there and recognize this stuff. In analytical, no. No, so you really have a huge advantage if you can do this. Yeah, Gary.
I did just 2 of them in this section. I got 12 right. Should I do 3? Or should I just try and focus on doing just 2 and mastering them, or what?
Well, Gary, it depends. The answer is, what I do is not necessarily what you should do.
Yeah.
You know, so like first things first, right? It's what's going to work for you. My sense of it is you want to expand it. You know, I would say to you, if you can do 2, right? Well, why can't you do 4? But let's be more conservative. If you can do 2, why can't you do 3? When you got to A, did you stop or did you keep going? And then if you're going to say to me, you stopped, you got to A, you pulled the trigger, and then I said, so how did you possibly spend 35 minutes on 2 hypotheticals? Right? It's just not common sense. Right? But again, this is not a college exam where you're being told you got to look at everything, exhaust everything. Bullshit. Right? I'm not going to exhaust things that are immaterial. I'm going to give them to you and let you exhaust them if you're on the other side of the case. So try, as you do exams 69 and 70, first things first, right? Do I recognize how to organize and manage? And then reasonable expectations. That I'm not going to get religion on this. I'm not, you know, if I'm in over my head on a particular question, well, you know what? I've got an entire new hypothetical to organize and manage.
That's what I did. I wasted time on 12 through 16. So I probably could have did 3 if I hadn't lagged, I suppose.
Yeah, it's great that you got 12 right and 2. That's great. That means you can do it. Now it's just, do you have the patience and the persistence to endure? Because you clearly have the invite. Yes? So are we saying yes to the LSAT? And now I'll be happy. Do you guys do you want to stretch or do you want to talk to me? Because I do want to turn my attention to the logical reasoning. Do you want to talk to me? Do you want to grab a soda or do you want to just keep going through? Okay. All right, we'll keep going. If you want a soda, go get a soda and go back. Okay.
that the movie we're gonna watch?